It is 6 o'clock, and once again, we are live here talking to Oregon Ducks on the Voice of College Football Network. My name is John Evans, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Owen Murray. Owen, it's good to see you, man. I'm excited to talk some Ducks football with you today.
We're so close, John. It's
We are
almost the
so
season.
close.
Are you gonna
We are
watch
so
Week 0
close.
on Saturday? Are you getting up for
I
Farmageddon?
think I got work on Saturday, but I will. Last year, I timed up my lunch break perfectly with the chaos at the end of that Florida State game, in Georgia Tech. So I'm hoping I can get something like that again. It was pretty funny.
We
But
think it's gonna be like a good game or no?
yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Top 25 matchup, right?
Yeah, but when they're playing the overseas and all things get weird and stuff. You got extra travel, extra all that stuff.
I do feel that.
Yeah, so we got a good show prepared for today. Gonna be doing as we head towards the start of the season. We're gonna do a full breakdown of what we are expecting from this Week 1 game against Montana State. Yet we'll get into that more next week. Talk about what to expect from Montana State. They're for an FCS team. It's interesting stuff, and we're gonna see what we see from them. But gotta kind of break down what we think success should look like for the Ducks, and then get into some bold predictions later for this season for Week 1. Kind of talk through what we think is going to be going on. Owen, I don't know if there's anything you want to hit before we get started here, but if you're ready, I think we could start with a little bit of kind of intel about what's been going on.
Yeah.
As much as everything's been locked down by Dan Lanning trying to go SEC style without practices. I was watching through all the interviews today, trying to see what's going on. The big thing to me right now with this team is the quarterback battle. We kind of went over some of the news from last week in terms of Trey McNutt's injury during JX's suspension. So not a ton of news coming out of the program right now, but the fact that you do have a legitimate quarterback battle is pretty interesting because it's something that you haven't really seen from this program in recent years. And it's when you do have a guy like Dante Moore that has been expected to be the starter, and he hasn't actually been declared that yet, it's kind of an interesting thing to see.
Yeah, I know Stein said this week they're expecting to name a starter in the next few days to week, and we do expect that to be Dante Moore. That seems like everything that's been coming out kind of from what we saw in the spring game all the way through to being compared to Teddy Bridgewater by Will Stein and being the guy who got that Beat sponsorship just the other day. It seems like Dante Moore will be the starter. That doesn't mean we can't be surprised, but I would be surprised if Moore is not named the starter. And it's a tough situation for Novosad, right? Because he had the advantage here of having more time in Will Stein's system. And I think that makes him a very valuable backup, especially in a system like this one they run at Oregon, where they're trusting high completion, high accuracy quarterbacks. I think he could be that, but they're gonna really bet on Dante Moore's arm talent, which is I know you've said the best since Justin Herbert. It's some of the best we've ever seen at Oregon.
Yeah, Moore's a super talented guy, and like you said, it is a tough situation for a guy in Novosad who does have the extra year on him in the program, but they're the same age, same class. Obviously, we saw them getting mixed in last year when Dylan Gabriel would be out when the Ducks are up big because you want to preserve. They were able to use a redshirt year for Dante Moore, but it's interesting to see that he hasn't actually been named that starter yet because it is competitive within that room. And they've talked about it. Guys like even Luke Moga has talked about how competitive it is in that room and how all of these guys are pushing each other to be better players, which I think is good. I think it's something that you need because Will Stein talked about it too this week, last week, in terms of they're all there to support each other, root each other on, and encourage each other. But at the same time, only one of them is going to play. And so they're competing. And I think that's really good. And he also, I think Stein also talked about how he doesn't want them to push anything. And I think that's something that's really important for this team with the way you've seen Oregon's offense work in recent years. It's an offense that's based on, it's short completions, using the run game, working the ball down the field methodically and letting your quarterback, whether that's Bo Nix or that's Dylan Gabriel, kind of be the point guard of the offense and distribute it to your playmakers when you have talented guys out there like last year, Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson, and this year you're excited about what Decorian Moore and what Mekhi Hughes can do for this offense. So I think you want Dante Moore and Austin Novosad, whoever, to get the ball into those guys' hands and kind of facilitate things more than try to be the star of that. And Stein was talking about in practice, he's trying to encourage these guys. If someone does make a play, someone does pop, if Dante hits a throw for 40 yards down the sideline, Novosad shouldn't feel like he needs to try to make up for that, and I need to make a big throw now, and all of a sudden Novosad's forcing something into double coverage, trying to throw under pressure, and you're making a turnover. That's something that Lanning has talked about time and time again, is that the biggest thing he wants to see from his quarterbacks is just being smart with the football. Like that's the number one thing you can't do is turn the football over. You need possessions. You need everyone you can get. So I think that's really important too, to see these guys kind of understand that, yeah, I'm competing with them. I see them flash, I see them pop, but I know what my job is, and do my job and execute the offense, which I think is a really important thing to see from these guys, especially as we head towards this early part of the season.
Exactly. The buzzword's maturity, right? That's what they're looking for. I think that's what whoever the guy who wins this quarterback battle is going to be the most mature quarterback. And that's going to be good for Oregon for all the reasons you just said.
Yeah, as we look at beyond the quarterback battle, what are some of the other positions that you're interested to see? Just like we call this one counting down to week one. It's this final stretch here. We're about a week out from the start of this. We're going to get football this weekend, but from the start of the season for everybody around the country, what are the other positions that you're looking at as things could really be coming down to this week, in terms of who's going to be out there week one to start this season?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple positions that you foresee even week one being a place for it to be tested, and wide receiver is one of those. I had somebody text me say, "Hey, who are the wide receiver stars?" I was like, I'm pretty sure DeCorian Moore is going to start, and beyond that, maybe Kyler Casper. I like the experience Gary Bryant has, but then you got Justice Lowe and Malik Benson who've really been popping according to some of these guys, and so that's where one of the things I'm really excited to see in week one is how much they really rotate this wide receiver group. And if they say, hey, these are going to be our three guys, and we're really gonna put all our chips in that bag. If they're going to say, hey, we understand that Justice Lowe can offer us something a little bit different to what Kyler Casper can, and we're gonna rotate that and see if we can find something different in different situations. But that honestly is the most interesting thing on this team for me. I know corner and safety in that DB room is interesting because you graduated so many players and sent them to the draft, but wide receiver for me, really kind of defines this team's ceiling, because we understand that, they'll probably have a pretty good run game with Mekhi Hughes. Kenyon Sadiq looks like one of the breakout candidates at tight end, but wide receiver, it is where this offense could fly. It's where it's flown in previous years. We just don't know if it's going to do that. There's not a defined guy this year.
Yeah, I think rotation will be an interesting thing at a lot of different spots, even on defense too. Tosh Lupoy talked about how last year they went into the season. You had starters in terms of, now I'm totally blanking, but it was Jabbar Muhammad and Nico Reed,
Yeah.
but then also Dante Manning. They come out in week two. Dante Manning starting against Boise State, so they were able to kind of. He said it's going to be like this again too in the secondary on the defensive line, where guys are going to be competing for reps every week in practice, and it might not be the same starters out there week after week. We'll see who starts week one, but that might not be the same group as who starts week two. If as a guy has a really good week of practice, it really shows that he can put something on the table, or depending on the game plan, who they're matched up with, who the Ducks are matched up against, what that other team succeeds at, kind of molding that game plan to fit around to fit who's on the field based around how we can attack this team, how we can attack that defense. I think it's going to be interesting to see in the cornerback room. You got those two guys in terms of Jaleel Florence and Theron Johnson with starting experience in the Pac-12 and the Big Ten at high level, but how much does a guy like Ife Obadegwu rotate in there? How much does a guy like Sione Laulea rotate in there? Because those are guys that are just really talented football players, and at a certain time, it gets hard to keep them off the field, even if they don't have as much experience as some of those other guys. And same thing on the defensive line. I think a guy that you kind of mentioned earlier, before we got the show started, but Ashton Porter got a lot of attention after the Ducks do their kind of documentary series through camp, and a lot of people got to learn about the story of Ashton Porter losing his mom last season, and being able to kind of a tough thing that absolutely nobody wants to go through. So being able to kind of refocus himself and use that as a motivation. Now he's playing for his mom and wants to, be able to put that success on the field. But a guy who came in around 270 pounds, but has put on weight, put on muscle to kind of be able to move from playing out at a wide nine, more of an outside linebacker position, to more of a true defensive end. And I think it was interesting because Tosh Lupoy said that he's one of the best rushers on the team. And I think it's going to be interesting to see when you have guys like Tatum Tuioti and Mateo Ingalale who have starting experience for the last two seasons, how much do guys like Elijah Rushing, Ashton Porter, Blake Purchase even get on the field on those pass rushing downs? So I think those guys could really make an impact. I think Elijah Rushing's another guy that really excites me just in terms of his potential off the edge. If you get into those 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 situations, you bring him in on a sub package and he's fresh. He can get around the corner and get around the edge, turn the corner, and try to go get after the quarterback. I think is going to be fun to see. And same on the defensive line. How does a guy like Amari Washington, a super talented football player, but at 330 pounds, how does his conditioning hold up? That was something that Tosh Lupoy talked about as well. And then can you rotate in guys like Tion Gray and Terrence Green behind him? How does Bear Alexander kind of fit into this defense? I think we got a lot of things to shake out within these first couple weeks of the season. I think that's going to be the most interesting thing to see, is just kind of how the dust settles, really.
Yeah, I will say the one important thing that you need to understand with what they're doing in these first few weeks, they're trying to find chemistry, because the Ducks have a very important game on the road at Penn State very early in their season. And the most important thing in that game is you want to have chemistry, especially on the money downs.
Yeah.
Whether that's on offense or defense, you want to have a unit that not only you trust to go make plays, but you trust each other. And it's tough to do that sometimes if you're rotating and mixing and matching every couple of plays. So that's going to be, they are trying to find the best players on this team, but they're also trying to find the group of players that works best together. And that's not always, the 4 best pass rushers.
Yeah, and trying to play it situationally, and like you said, just finding that chemistry and across different groups, making sure the secondary is going to be able to communicate with each other, making sure that the linebackers are communicating with the defensive line, and that they are getting everybody lined up right and lined correctly. So I think we just got to see how it shakes out. At this point, we don't really know that much about what's going on at practice because Stan Lanning has shut things down. And anytime anybody asks about the press conference, he tells them, I'm not going to answer that question. So it's really hard to try to find out that information. But we just got to see it on the field, and I think playing an FCS team, Montana State is a really talented FCS team, one of the best ones out there. But you do have a little bit of a chance to get extra guys on the field and get some of those younger guys reps that they maybe wouldn't. They won't against Penn State, when you're going to want your big bodies, your Mateo Uiagalelei out there on every single down.
Absolutely.
Moving on, a little bit of news on the recruiting trail. The Ducks still sitting with one of the best classes in the country right now, number 7. They've got 17 commits on the 17 players committed to come here next season. Where are you at with this class right now, and in the way things are heading into the recruiting? You feeling things are still heading in the right direction for the Ducks on the recruiting trail?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We talked about this more in depth a little bit. We got a long form video that you can go check out if you're interested in our extended thoughts. But yeah, we understand that they're shooting for quality over quantity, and that as some people say, stars matter, and that they've got a lot of stars in this class. Yeah, I'm more than satisfied. I think they've proven themselves. I will be curious to see what this class looks like once it gets added to from the transfer portal, which obviously we won't know for a while, but where they say, hey, we understand that maybe we didn't get our first or second or third choice guy at this spot, so we're gonna go really try to get a first or second choice guy from the portal.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing with the Ducks right now is like you said, it's building that quantity over the quality, and so they're sitting at 17 guys, but they're still trying to get a few more guys and try to round this out, probably around a number in the low 20s. So some interesting things I've read recently, that they're still kind of going after guys and trying to flip guys like Ryder Lyons, a guy they were in the top 2, I think, for a quarterback who's now committed to BYU. But the Ducks and the Ducks staff and Ryder Lyons are still in communication. It sounds like I think he'll be there for a game this season. Same with Chris Henry. Tom Loy from 24/7 Sports also reported this recently too, that a guy who's a 5-star receiver, number 3 ranked receiver in the country, but committed to Ohio State, but still in communication with the Oregon staff. And they're still trying to heavily pursue those flips. So recruiting these days, it's not the way it was where you land that commitment and that's your player. You really gotta recruit these guys, and then once you get that commitment, keep recruiting them, because other teams are going to come after them until signing day, until they put pen to paper. Emmanuel Iheanacho, Oregon's one of their top recruits in this class, an offensive tackle. He'll be at a bunch of games this season for the Ducks. I think he said he'll be at 4 different games, but he's still going to be taking. He was Penn State was one of those other teams that he was looking at. He's going to be there for that Penn State or Oregon when Oregon heads to Penn State. He's also going to be going to some LSU games. So Oregon's got to make sure you're not letting those teams sneak up behind you and kind of be able to steal those recruits at the last second. So I like the way things are heading with this class for sure, but definitely just keeping things locked down as we head down the stretch towards December and towards signing day.
Absolutely.
All right, so that kind of wraps up the news kind of for what we had going on. Not a ton of news going on within the program right now because, like we've said, it's just waiting to see what happens at the beginning of the season. But we're gonna get into a little bit of a preview of Week 1. Next week we'll get into more about Montana State. But as we saw last season, a victory is not always the number one thing to come out of Week 1 because Oregon won their game against Idaho last season, but it was not the game that everyone thought they were going to get. It was a lot closer than people thought it would be. That it was a 1-score game in the fourth quarter, and people felt a lot shakier about the Ducks after that. So we're going to kind of go back and forth and break down what we think success will look like for the Ducks in Week 1. Where the areas that after Week 1, we're going to kind of be after Week 1, was this a successful thing? Are we feeling good about this area and moving forward? Because last year, the offensive line felt a little bit questionable after Week 1. Can the defense limit those explosive plays? Felt a little bit questionable after Week 1. So, Owen, I'm going to let you go first, and then we'll go back and forth, kind of break it down what we think are the things that the Ducks need besides a win to feel like they had a successful Week 1 of this season.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm going to start right there with the offensive line. That was the biggest story coming out of Week 1 last year. I think we can say is that, they gave up, maybe 3 sacks in that game. Coming off a year where there were Joe Moore Awards finalists, people did not, you could expect a little bit of turnover because of the guys you let go to the draft. But it was much worse than people thought. And it got better throughout the year, but that was really a shock to see, especially, against an FCS team. That's what I want to see. And I think it'll work. I think this team, this group, particularly the starters we expect, are very connected. I dove into that for a little article this week for the Daily Emerald. And just the way these guys talk about each other sounds like they've been friends for years, which is hilarious because they've known each other for 6 months maybe. But they're already joking. They already like it, we talk to them media day and they sound like they love each other. You hear how much these guys interact, and I think that really does matter on the field. Last year you had a group that you weren't really sure who were starting at center. It was Poncho for a little bit. It was Charlie Pickard for a little bit. Right now they have a Remington contender at center. I believe it'll work, but that's what I need to see proof that the O-line will be consistent. I think that defines the success of Dante Moore. I think it defines how successful Mekhi Hughes will be. It's the most important thing in this game.
Yeah, I think that's something interesting that Coach Lanning has kind of been saying recently is that this is phase 5 of the offseason for them. So guys who like Isaiah World, who committed as a transfer, I saw him on campus in February and March. These guys have been around the program for almost 8 months now. They've been, even if they haven't been necessarily on the field until the beginning of August, obviously they had practices in the spring too, but they were working out all offseason, developing that chemistry. And I think that's something, that chemistry, that's something that's going to be really important for this offensive line, because you saw it last year. They just kind of needed to find everybody into their right roles and settle things down, because last year when Matthew Bedford goes down right before the season, all of a sudden Poncho sliding from center to guard, Charlie Pickard's in the starting lineup, you're moving things all around. I think the fact that you kind of know who this group is going to be, you think what this starting group should look like on the offensive line, in terms of Isaiah World at left tackle, Emmanuel Pregnon, a really talented transfer from USC. Alik Terry was talking a lot about how his length has been super huge in pass protection and just gives him an advantage out there. Word? Yeah, right? Yeah. And to be able to have a guy with almost tackle length playing him on the interior, Poncho will lock things down. I think having a center who is going to be there, is going to get things set. He talked about how he's been trying to learn things throughout the offense from other positions to understand not just what my job is, but why this is my job. Why do I have to do this on this play to make the team successful, which I think is really awesome to see. And then obviously Matthew Bedford, getting him in, getting him back and healthy. When you got him in last season, you thought you're going to have a strong guy at guard who has Big Ten starts, has experience starting at the highest levels of college football, but then you lose him for the whole season. Getting him back another year older, just a really experienced guy in there. And then Alex Harkey, another transfer, but a really experienced guy. And like you said, just the chemistry that they've been able to develop when you have really four transfers. Bedford didn't transfer this year, but came in last year. Developing that chemistry together, I think, will be interesting to see. And in terms of keeping Dante more upright and on his feet, that's going to be necessary for his success. And then opening those, like you said, opening those lanes for Mekhi Hughes. Dave Iuli's a guy who could work in there too. Played a pretty good amount at guard last year when they had some injuries later in the season. But I think developing that chemistry, finding a solidified rotation, or not rotation, because you don't really want to be rotating your offensive line, but finding your solidified roles within that offensive line will be really important to see. I didn't really necessarily plan this out, but I was texting you earlier, and I was kind of figuring out what we were going to be talking about for this show today, and you kind of picked out a couple offensive things to look for in week one. So I went to the other side of the ball, and the number one thing for me that the Ducks need to be successful in is finding success on early downs against the run against this Montana State team. Because last year, Tasha Lupo, I talked about it, they were feeling good about where they were at the end of the regular season in terms of the run defense. But then you go play Penn State rushes pretty well, and then Ohio State puts up some big. All of a sudden, Travion Henderson's breaking away for some big runs, and it tanked some of the numbers at the end of the season in terms of the yards per carry and all that stuff that Oregon, the goals that the defense wants for themselves. So Montana State is a team that last year ran the ball more times than any other FCS team and finished with 1,200 more rushing yards than North Dakota State, who is this number two FCS teams in terms of rushing yards. They got a new quarterback in this season. They lost their quarterback last year who also put up 1,000 rushing yards. They had two running backs last year put up 1,000 rushing yards. It's going to be a different team for them, but we know that's what they want to do. And can the Ducks, fill those gaps on early downs and stop the run and be able to get into advantageous situations? Because what Montana State's offense is built on is we're going to run. If we're running for 5 to 6 yards on first down, it's going to set up an easy second down. And if we can get even closer on third down, it's going to be even easier. Or we can run for 5 yards again, and then all of a sudden it's a first down. So how do Betcher and Devin Jackson look kind of, filling the A gap, filling the B gap, being able to hit those holes downfield and scrape across the top and be able to do all the things that you need to do to be a successful linebacker defending the run? And can Amari Washington have the stamina, to be defending the run on early downs and then rushing the passer later? And do you have guys that can be penetrators in the way that like a guy like Derek Harmon was last year, where he's in the backfield and stripping the ball from Quinshot Judkins in front of everybody at Autzen? So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that goes for them, especially against in an FCS team, but it still is a test as a run defense, because this is an FCS team that likes to run the ball and has done it very successfully.
Yeah, and I mean, when we talk about how much this secondary needs to prove itself, probably, a little bit more than the defensive or the front seven, get success on early downs against the run is what's going to not put that unit on the back foot. You want to put it in situations it understands how to control this secondary. And what you don't want is to have it consistently in second and short, having to worry about shot plays, having to worry about this team that is really strong running the ball, that you have to commit defenders to that way, defending the pass unassisted. That it's going to be important. Not only just in terms of stopping Minnesota, Montana State's rushing attack, but in terms of
to stop Minnesota later in the season. Yeah,
they will. In terms of giving this secondary a really nice place to start the season from.
Yeah, what's the next spot that you're kind of looking to for the offense to find success in this Montana State game?
I'm looking at all these, and they really do all matter because of the offensive line. But I am curious how Mekhi Hughes adapts to this team. Obviously we won't see him play an FBS team, that first week. But I want to see what he looks like behind a Big Ten offensive line, one that we expect to be one of the best in the nation. I'm curious if he looks like the same guy he looked like at Tulane, because, if he has that pop early, that means good stuff, not only for Oregon's run game, but also, it takes a little bit of the pressure off a guy like Dante Moore to create. It takes a little bit of pressure off the wide receiver core to be the big play. If you can get, like we said with the Montana State offense, if you can get into second and short consistently, that opens up so many things for your offense, especially an offense like Oregon.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the thing, and in terms of opening up the pass game as well too. Can you take things off of Dante Moore's plate and get him into advantageous situations on 2nd and 5 where you feel you're comfortable taking a shot to Decorian more deep down the sideline, or trying to hit Kenyon Sadiq on a deep post over the middle and utilize some run after the catch and get some explosive gains, because I can take a bit of a risk here on 2nd and 5 or 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4, whatever, because it's going to be 3rd and 4, and I know I can convert that in when I have guys who can make plays after the catch in a short yardage passing situation. So Mekhi Hughes is a really talented guy at Tulane, but it's been Tulane. It hasn't been the top levels of college football. It's been the American Athletic Conference. It's not the Big Ten. It's as powerful and as explosive as we think he is, and from what we've seen on tape from him at Tulane, he hasn't done it at the highest levels of college football before. So we'll have to see what that looks like in the Big Ten. I think he's a guy that can absolutely do that, and I think they're going to be wanting to run the ball with him early. I would expect him to get. I think Oregon comes out that first drive against Montana State, and they give the ball to Mekhi Hughes like 5+ times on that drive, and they're trying to just run the ball down Montana State's throat and establish this is what a Big Ten offensive line looks like. This is what Big Ten running looks like, and we are bigger, we're stronger, we're better than you, and we're just going to bully you and kind of move the ball down the field like we want to.
Yeah, they must have watched that Clint Kubiak drive, man.
Exactly. Looked pretty good for the Seahawks.
Listen, if that's what I see Oregon come out and do that first drive, I think that could be one of that, like, potentially the best thing that could happen.
Absolutely. All right, moving back to the other side of the ball. Defense. I think being able to generate pressure with 4 rushers, I think, is going to be really important for this team. Last year, they had such a strong core of the 5 guys in that starting group that they had, with Mateo and Tatum coming off the edge, and then Jordan Birch obviously being an absolute beast, moving inside outside, kind of a joker. You can move all over the field a little bit, and be able to create havoc from anywhere. But can Mateo kind of really be that guy that can create pressure one-on-one by himself, and you don't have to bring extra blitzers? You can be able, when you do have a young safeties, a young secondary, can you not have to bring those extra rushers and be able to give as much as you can to that secondary, cover up everything, and then be able to get after the quarterback and get off the field on 3rd downs? I think it's going to be really important to see how does Bear Alexander do as a 3 tech and be able to get to the quarterback. And then I think also some of those other guys too. I think, can Elijah Rushing be that guy that comes in on 3rd downs and gets after the quarterback? And Tatum Tuiyoti's been playing really good run defense on early downs. Obviously, you want Tatum to get his pass rush opportunities too, but then you bring in Elijah Rushing. He's fresh. He hasn't been out there, and he can just go get after the quarterback. I think if you can do that, it goes hand in hand with what I said earlier, finding the success on early downs to create advantageous situations on 3rd downs where you can, send 4, and then all of a sudden, if you want to, then you bring that blitz that really throws them off every once in a while, and then you can get some big sacks, maybe force an interception, force a forced fumble, and then create a turnover that can really change the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be one of the important things, especially against a new quarterback, right? You want to make him uncomfortable, and if you can make it uncomfortable with 4, that's always better. Yeah,
going back to the other side of the ball, where's this last point you want to hit in terms of finding success for this Oregon offense in week 1?
I mean, it's the big question, really, which is assuming Dante Moore is the starter, how comfortable is he? Because the big issue at UCLA was a low completion percentage. It was lots of interceptions. We just never really saw him get comfortable. Behind an offensive line that wasn't the best. Getting kind of inconsistent starts and getting put into games late after they pulled guys. I think if you can just see him come out there and be a point guard, really we know he has the arm talent, and it'd be great if he can show that. But really, what he needs to prove is that he can be calm and methodical and mature, which are all things I think he has in him. But that's what you want to see, especially if this game ends up being closer, like that Idaho one was. Dylan Gabriel was important in that game because he had been in situations like that, because he's not a guy getting his first start in a situation he doesn't want to be in. Dante Moore has starting experience. If it's Austin Novosad, he hasn't had a start before. Yeah, I want to see the maturity, and I want to see how comfortable he is. Whether or not that offensive line holds up like we expect it to.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing a game like what last year's game to start the season looked like for Dylan Gabriel, where he was like over 40 completions for like 350 something yards. For Dante Moore, not necessarily to that level. I don't need it to be, because I think that they should be running the football more, because they should probably be up in this game and not needing to stage late drives to make sure you're putting things away. But I would like to see him, like you said, point guard the offense and be able to take those little shots and just look comfortable, look like he's been familiar with the system, which he should be at this point because he's been practicing in it for the last year. So I want that to show up on the field, and that he does know this offense. He knows where his guys are going to be, and he's able to take the layups when they're there. And then when he does see that opportunity for a big play, can you capitalize it and make those explosives and just protect the football, keep your offense on the field, and don't give up anything that's going to kind of change this game in a negative way.
Absolutely. I think that, we talked about how important the offensive line is. I think I'll stick with that as the most important thing. You still have one more to get to. Is your next one the most important thing for defense?
No, I think those first two is really where the game plan starts. But I think this is going to be interesting to see too. Just, you got to make sure you're limiting explosives too. The Dan Lanning has talked about how the defense did a really good job of that, has done a good job of that in their scrimmages and stuff so far. And I think that's going to be important to see for this team, because it became a little bit of a problem at the end of last year, and in terms of the downfall of the team in that Ohio State game, and even in some of that Penn State game in the Big Ten championship, where if you have miscommunicate, I wrote in my notes here, communicate. When you have a guy like Dylan Thieneman who has experience, but he's going to be surrounded by young guys in the secondary, whether that's Kingston Lopa or Aaron Flowers next to him at safety, whether that's Dalen Austin at the nickel, you're going to have guys who haven't really played together. So can they communicate on that backside and keep everything in front of you, is what I wrote down here. Because last year we saw Idaho hit a flea flicker and score a 36-yard touchdown in the third quarter. That all of a sudden, I was watching that game with my former roommate, and we were all of a sudden we were like, what's going on here? Why is Idaho hitting 36 40-yard touchdowns on Oregon? It feels like Oregon should be the team that's putting up these big explosives. You got to keep everything in front of you, and don't let anything don't let anyone slip behind you. Make sure you just keep limiting them to the short gains, and that they're not going to get any sort of 30-40-yard gain that's going to give them momentum and feel like, oh, we can play with these guys and we're at this level, when Oregon should really be at a different level than a team like Montana State.
Absolutely. All right, we're gonna head to a quick break really quick. Come back, talk about some hot takes. There's your buzzword for the day. For this season. All right, we'll be right back.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click Join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
All right, we're back here. We got about probably 20 minutes left or so tonight, but we're going to go through some bold predictions for this season. I told Owen to come up with 5 bold predictions for the year, 4 for the season, and then 1 for this Montana State game, where we'll finish up with those. But we're each going to give our bold predictions, and then I want to hear if you believe in mine, don't believe in mine, and what you have to say about them. And I'm gonna give you some feedback on what you got. So Owen, if you want to get us started here with what's your first bold prediction for the season for these Ducks?
All right, well, so we know that these Ducks do very well when they don't give up a ton of points. I mean, that's what any college football team does, but especially the Ducks. Under Dan Lanning and Tosh Lupoy, they're almost perfect when they don't give up 32. I'm saying the Ducks don't give up 30 or more points in the regular season. If they do so, I think they have a really great chance at another spot in the Big Ten championship game. How do you feel about that?
I think that's one that could absolutely happen because I think the biggest threat to put up points like that on the Ducks is Penn State, and obviously you saw them get into a shootout with Penn State last year where it ended up being 45-38. But at home for Penn State, I don't know. Now that I think about it, I think that this one doesn't come true. I think somebody can get to 30, and I think it's either a team like Penn State or even a team like Washington if Damon Williams can put things together and hit a couple big plays to guys like Denzel Boston. I think somebody will be able to do it. I don't think there are that many threats though. I think it's really you're looking at can Penn State do it? Can Indiana do it if Kirk Cignetti gets his offense right again and they're cooking with Fernando Mendoza? But I think somebody can get there, and I think Penn State would be the team to do that because you did see them get into a bit of a shootout with Penn State last year, and Drew Aller is going to be back. I think that's obviously that's been the biggest threat on Oregon's schedule this entire season, but I think that would be the team to do it.
Yeah, I'm betting a little bit that game looks a little bit more like the game Penn State played at home against Ohio State last year, instead of the game they played against Oregon, or the Ohio State games that Jim Knowles, their new defensive coordinator, was involved in last year. Ohio State put up 30 plus twice on the Ducks. I don't think that's going to happen again.
Yeah, I would like to see it for the Ducks. I don't know if we'll see it throughout the entire season, but I think 30 points is an interesting mark because I think you could see Oregon winning games where they score their opponent scores more than 30. We've seen it before in the past, but as we get more and more into Dan Lanning's tenure with the Ducks are a defensive team. Oregon is known for their speed, but they've got a defensive head coach now. Dan Lanning recruits on the defensive side of the football at a very high level. So I think it's going to be interesting to see that. And I think Penn State could be the team to do it, but there's like you said, there's definitely a good chance that the Ducks do to kind of go flawlessly through this season in terms of their defense, kind of limiting those explosive scoring games.
All right, what do we got?
All right. So for my first bold prediction is that Kenyon Sadiq, not only does he surpass Terrence Ferguson and Ed Dixon's record, Ferguson hit this last year, 43 receptions on the season, most for a tight end in program history, but I think Kenyon Sadiq actually leads this team in receptions this year because you do lose your expected number one target in Evan Stewart. Not only that, but Sadiq's the kind of guy that you kind of you saw it last year in terms of the jet sweeps that they would give to him, the screen passes you would set up for him. You just want the ball in his hands. He's a playmaker. We saw it in the Big Ten championship game. And I think they're either going to get the ball to him a lot in the short area, like catches within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, and let him go do something after the catch. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up with 50, 65 catches on this season and can push close to 1,000 yards because I think he's going to be – I think he could really be the number one target in this offense because Dante Moore's practicing with him last season with the twos probably throughout a lot of that year. I would like to hope there's chemistry between those two guys, and I think Sadiq, we know the talent he has. If he has a season that he could have with as an explosive as a guy as he is, he could push himself into being one of those early day two, even a day one pick next year as a tight end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, or I don't think there's any question that this is a team that trusts Kenyon Sadiq, even though he's a guy who hasn't started consistently for this program. It's only because there's been one of the best program tight ends in program history ahead of him. And when you look at that, you say, hey, this is a guy he's learned from. We know he's uber talented. We know he's multifaceted. And like you said, Will Stein's whole philosophy is let's just get the ball in the hands of the playmakers. Kenyon Sadiq is that kind of guy. I think this is absolutely something that could happen.
All right, Owen, back to you. Where are you going with your next prediction for the Ducks this season?
We're going to keep talking about the offensive line, man. Twice under Dan Lanning and Will Stein and Leak Terry, they've been a Joe Moore Award finalists. I think they do it again. And only if, because there's going to be so much emphasis on how well this offensive line does. It was in the spotlight last year at the beginning of the year. It kind of, you want your offensive line to be out of the spotlight. In theory, I think it's going to be in the spotlight, not only because, they have a big job to do in protecting a guy who's making his first full season of starts in college football, but also because you got a big money running back coming in. And this line is going to be a big part of whether or not he succeeds. I do think they succeed. Like I said, I backed him in the first game to keep Dante Moore upright. I think they will be a Joe Moore Award finalist. third time under Alec Terry, Dan Lanning, Will Stein. I think that says something big about those guys.
Yeah, I have to say I'm with you on this one. I think Joe Moore Award finalist should be the expectation, and that's something that this team should be striving for, is to take that award home. We've seen them be a finalist the last 2 years, but can they get over the top and actually capture that? It's not necessarily like a feasible thing for them, or their goal should be to win football games. But if you're doing that successfully, it's because the offensive line is playing well, and they should put themselves in that position. I just think the experience that this group has is what really stands out to me. When you look at, you got the three guys in the middle, all have high level college football starting experience in the Big Ten, in terms of Pregnon, Poncho, and then Matthew Bedford at left guard, center, and right guard, and then Isaiah World and Alex Harkey. Both of those guys are coming from G5 schools in Nevada and Texas State, but they have years of starting experience, and you feel like you're comfortable with those guys because they're older, they've started. I think if you find that chemistry with this group early, I think this could be one of the best offensive lines that Oregon has put out in recent years. And that's saying a lot, considering that you did have a guy in Josh Connerly go in the first round last year. Johnny Cornelius was an NFL draft pick as well. Jackson Powers Johnson, just the names that this team has consistently put out year over year on the offensive line. And those are guys that guys like Poncho have been able to learn from. Having playing behind a guy like Jackson Powers Johnson when he was a freshman a couple years ago. So I think that's something that this team could absolutely do. I wouldn't even say finalist is even that bold of a prediction. I would say a winner would be the bold prediction there, because I think this is a group that can do that, because you obviously have. I think they could. I think that should be the.
I think they could.
Absolutely. I think just the experience, like I said, that's the biggest thing that stands out to me with this group, and creating that chemistry. And like you said, they like you wrote in your article, they feel like they have a lot of chemistry, and they've been able to develop that shortly. So if we see that translate into success on the field, we keep Dante Moore off the turf like less than 10 times. This is a group that could definitely do that.
Absolutely. Where are we going next?
All right. Speaking of Dante Moore, I think that my bold prediction for him is that, because we talked about the arm talent that he has, that he can make this offense more explosive than it's been in recent years. This team has been able to generate explosives, but it hasn't necessarily been because their quarterback is launching the ball downfield, like you see with guys like Jalen Milroe at Alabama or whatever. I think Dante Moore has the arm that can do that. I think you got to find your layups and play the game that you need to, but he can huck the ball kind of a little bit all over the field. Dylan Gabriel had 27 completions of over 20 yards last year. I think Dante Moore has more than that. When we go to PFF, they track their big time throws, in terms of balls that are 20 yards down the field, good placement, good accuracy. Dante Moore, when he was a starter at UCLA a couple of years ago, his big time throw rate was double that of what Dylan Moore posted last year. It was a smaller sample size, or Dylan Gabriel posted last year. It was a smaller sample size for Dante Moore because he didn't start that full season, because he was dealing with inconsistent offensive line play and just the things that happen to you when you are a 19-year-old trying to start in Pac-12 football, like at the highest levels of college football. I think I think Dante Moore could push towards 30 plus completions over 20 yards and really generate those explosives within this offense that maybe haven't been there always with a guy like Dylan Gabriel, who's a lot better at kind of playing under control and kind of taking the things that the defense gives you.
Yeah, I am curious, when you think about guys making wow throws in this offense, the first thing I go back to is a throw I saw in person, which was the Bo Nix crossbody against Oregon State, just to end that.
Yeah.
When I think of wow throws, like, there is something to that, because, you remember
the one for me is Bo Nix to Troy Franklin before you got to Oregon against UCLA, just deep over the middle. I think Dante Moore is the type of receiver who, and especially when you have explosive guys like DeCorian Moore in the offense, who can hit those kinds of throws.
And that how do I phrase this? Everything in the world is great about a short completion offense that keeps you going, and you hype guys up by saying, hey, you're really consistent. But there's some of the throws like the ones that Bo made to Troy Franklin, that just really make you believe. They fire your team up. They get them excited to go run deep. I think
it can really change the game too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an entirely different threat to what Oregon did last year. Dylan Gabriel could make big time deep throws. We saw it against Ohio State a couple times, but to really have a guy who, for whom that's a weapon, and that's really something you have to focus on, would be really huge for these Ducks.
All right, going back to you, Owen. Where's your next prediction for this team?
I'm excited because we got differing opinions here. I don't think Oregon has the Big Ten sack leader. We've talked a lot about how excited we are for this defensive line. I took them first overall when we were drafting the best units last week, but I don't think that there's an individual player here who leads the Big Ten in sacks. I think the Ducks will lead the Big Ten in sacks as a group. I think this is going to be one of the best groups in the country. But I don't think there's a single guy who's going to stand out, because there's going to be so much focus on a guy like Mateo, who was in the top 3 in the Big Ten in sacks last year. But I think you're going to see so much rotation there. And while there will be a first 4 that you like, it's not going to be one guy really pushing to get the most sacks.
Okay, so I'll just go ahead and say
go ahead, please.
My prediction here is that Mateo is the Big Ten sack leader because I think he just is. I understand where you're coming from in terms of this is. I think they are going to rotate. I think Mateo might end up with maybe slightly less snaps than he had last year, just because you feel a little bit more comfortable with guys like Ashton Porter coming into the game and bringing in guys like Elijah Rushing and Blake Purchase. But I think he's just that talented of a player and that much of a havoc wrecker in the backfield that I think he gets there again. Like we said, finished top 3 in the Big Ten in sacks last year with 10.5, only behind Abdul Carter, the number 3 pick of the draft, and then JT Tuimoloau, a super highly rated prospect coming out of Seattle here, actually.
Who we should also know, both those guys played 2 more games than he did by the end of the season.
Yeah, that's true as well. But either way, those are the only 2 guys who finished ahead of him on the sacks list. And then you look at some other guys. Mikhail Kamara from Indiana had 10 for them last season. And then the guy that everyone's hyping up right now is kind of the next edge rusher to come out of Penn State, Danny Denny-Sutton, had 8.5 sacks for them last year. I think he could definitely be challenging Mateo. And I do understand where you're coming from in terms of I think this is going to be a talented group, and I like that call that they won't have the individual sack leader, but the team as a whole will lead the conference in sacks. I think that's a good one right there. But I think Mateo is going to be a big part of that, and I think he finishes close to 14, 15 sacks and really puts himself into that first round conversation and could potentially be a guy who goes top 10 because you just look at the physical tools that he has at his size. You stand in front of him and you're like, that was one of the first wow moments I had as a college football reporter when I was showing up to my first practices last season or coming off of Mateo's freshman year. And he was standing in front of me. I was asking him questions. I was like, God, this guy is big, man. He is a big dude. He's got long arms and really athletic. Like he can get after the quarterback. We saw it last season. I think he's just going to only continue to get better and better.
Yeah. And that take in no way means that he's not going to be in the conversation for Big Ten sack leader. I think he absolutely will be in that conversation. I just think he's going to lose out to guys who maybe are more of the 1-star guy on teams. Except I'm just betting on the Ducks to have a bunch of stars.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, where are we going with this next prediction from you?
All right, I had to come with some. I wanted to look a little bit at the postseason, at this playoff format. I think the Ducks will host a first-round college football playoff game. Saying this not only because I think it'll happen, but also because I would really love to see what the atmosphere looks like for a playoff game at Autzen Stadium. I think it happens, the most likely way that this happens, is to say the Ducks maybe go to the Big Ten championship game rather, and lose, or are the top qualifier not in that Big Ten championship game. Probably the first one. And I think it would be really exciting, just to see especially because there's not a game like that Ohio State game at Autzen Stadium this year. I would love to see it firing. Ducks, obviously haven't hosted one since they switched the format. I think it would be really exciting. Maybe this is just wish fulfillment.
Yeah, no, actually, I have to agree with you on this take. I think that because they switched the formatting, and you're going to have the top 4 teams in general in there. I think Oregon, I don't know if they're necessarily in that top 4. I think they absolutely could be there, and they absolutely could be getting a bye like they did last season. But I think you can see it in terms of where they're ranked right now at number 7. That projects them to be one of those teams that would be hosting a first-round game. And like you said, I would love to see the environment of Autzen Stadium for a playoff game. We saw how rowdy it got for that Ohio State game last year, how all the Ohio State fans who came to Autzen and then all of a sudden were having to plug their ears and getting a little intimidated by the noise that this Autzen Stadium crowd makes, because Autzen has the rare ability to make 60,000 sound like 100,000. It's just a special place in terms of the environment. People who haven't been to Autzen kind of don't really understand that in a certain way, but I've been to other places around. I've been to Lane Stadium at Virginia Tech. I've been to Husky Stadium here in Seattle. It's not the same. Those places are lit they get rocking when the Huskies are playing, when the Hokies are playing. But Autzen Stadium, just the way the stadium is constructed as a bowl, creates just a wall of noise that just smacks these teams and can really frustrate them. I would love to see a first round playoff game at Autzen Stadium, and I think that it could absolutely happen. I got to agree with you on this one here.
Yeah, I've never been somewhere except for Autzen Stadium, where I was playing in the band and you couldn't hear the band. That Ohio State game, we were playing the fight song. Couldn't have told me, man. All I knew is that my
honestly, I don't even remember the fight song going on. It was just yelling from 0-0-0 on that clock to until Will Howard slid down at the end of that one.
Absolutely, and I think that's exactly the environment you would get. I'd love to see it one more time before we head out.
Yeah. Okay. So next up for me, I think that Mekhi Hughes becomes the first Oregon running back in over a decade to post 20 touchdowns in a season.
Okay.
Kenyon Barner has the school record for touchdowns is 21. Kenyon Barner did in 2012. LaMichael James had it in 2010. Those are two of the best running backs in program history. You look at the list of names on Oregon's running backs list. I was going through that through this to try to find that touchdown mark. Jordan James had 15 for this team last year. You guys had guys like now I'm blanking on names here.
Oh, Bucky Irving.
Yeah, Bucky Irving. There's one guy I was thinking of that I can now completely not remember from the 2010s in terms of running backs. But Oregon has had really good running backs, but hasn't had someone get to that 20 touchdown mark since 2012. Royce Freeman, that's the name I'm thinking of. Royce Freeman had like 17, 18 touchdowns one of the years. Very good running back for the Ducks. I think Mekhi Hughes could get to 20 for the Ducks this season. He's a really powerful guy. We saw him have success in the red area for Tulane last season, scored 15 touchdowns for them. We've seen when you do have those powerful guys like Jordan James, how much Will Stein likes to rely on them in that short area to be able to punch things in. Jordan James had 15 touchdowns last year, and that was coming off, I think he had double-digit seasons the year before that when he was rotating really with Bucky Irving still. I think Mekhi Hughes, not because you don't have trust in Dante Moore, but because it is a younger quarterback. Will Stein talked about it too, just kind of that Dylan Gabriel last year had those red zone picks a couple of times because he was still just getting adjusted to the system. Dante Moore's been in this system, but I think you want to rely on a guy like Hughes you think is a known commodity down there, and you can give him the ball on the 5-yard line and think he's going to go punch things in. So I think because of a combination of the style of runner he is, where he does have pop when he hits people in the hole and can come downhill, and the situation where you do have a young quarterback and you want to rely on your running back in the red zone, I think he could get to that 20 touchdown mark and really solidify himself as like a Doak Walker Award finalist and maybe even going as a day 2 guy in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also kind of says something about how much they trust it, or maybe not how much they trust, but how this wide receiver room shakes out. If Mekhi Hughes becomes the number 1 option when you say, hey, we really do need to go convert this goal to go situation.
Yeah, because you don't DeCorian Moore, you hope can be a guy to create opportunities in the red zone. You hope Kyler Casper can go catch some fade balls. But Evan Stewart last year, you saw him against Ohio State be able to go back shoulder and catch fade balls. He's a guy that I thought would have been a good target in the red zone for this team, but he's a guy that you're not going to have for the majority of this season. So I think rely on Mekhi Hughes, especially in the short area, and be able to kind of punch those ones in. And I think he'd end up finishing with a super high touchdown total, kind of one that might surprise people when you look back at it and you're like, wow, he had 18, 19, maybe even 20 touchdowns for the Ducks this year.
Yeah, that does feel suitably bold because it is tough to say if he's going to hit that mark because just because you haven't seen guys do it and you haven't seen guys do it in the system and there hasn't been a ton of turnover in terms of coaches. But it is something that could happen. Yeah, just because it is that. I will be curious to see what the overlap is, how much they look at Kenyon Sadiq in the red zone because that could be when you have a big guy who can really go match up on a corner or a safety or a linebacker. I think that could be the go-to option.
Or even a guy like Jamari Johnson at 6'6", doing what he being able to be a jump ball threat at tight end. Also, just want to say too, because of what Zach Race was able to do as a fullback last year, with the success that they were able to have in that Penn State game and some of those other games, getting into those jumbo formations, I think we could see more of that this year. When Zach Race got in at the beginning of the season, everyone thought it was Tatum Tuioti playing offense. As we learned who Zach Race was, and that he was, because both of them are number 44. As we learned who Zach Race was, and that Will Stein does want to use him in that fullback role, I think we could see that a little more, getting under center, you running the football out of the I formation, getting some power runs, some counters and stuff like that towards the red zone, and let Mekhi Hughes kind of follow his blockers and punch those ones in.
All right, here's before we get to these last ones that are kind of the Montana State ones. Are we going over or under? Let's say 1.5 offensive lineman touchdowns this year. I know we saw the G Baby one last year. Do you think there's one? Do you think there's two in the bag here?
I think my prediction actually is that I talked to Amari Washington at this beginning of the season. I think we see a defensive lineman touchdown. Amari Washington will have a bigger
on offense.
Yes, well, he'll have a bigger role on offense this season, but we saw him last year get used as a fullback in some certain situations. I asked him if he's going to get the ball at all this year, and he says he's been talking to Coach Stein. So I'd like to see Amari Washington at least get one touchback there up from like the 1 yard line and let him try to punch something in.
That'd be exciting. Dude, you know those guys love it, right?
Exactly.
I could not wait to talk to him after that. Honestly, that would be the best thing.
Exactly, because the best part too about that game last year against Maryland, I don't know if you were you there for that one in the press and stuff?
No, not in the box, but I was there. Yeah.
Yeah, Janoris Wilson after the game was so. I mean, not often you get to talk to a backup offensive lineman in the media availability after the game. That dude was having a good time after the game because he had scored that touchdown. I thought it was just so fun that not only did Birch had a punt return or a fake punt rumbled for 36 yards as a 270-pound defensive lineman. Then they flicked the ball out to Janoris Wilson. And then my favorite one of all was lining Josh Connerly up as a Wildcat quarterback and letting him run the ball in on the 2-point conversion. So I'd like to see Amari Washington get a touch back there at fullback.
All right, book it. We are going to go into a couple here just specifically for that first round game. Like we said, we'll preview it in more depth next week, maybe bring somebody on to chat about it. But I think, we talked about how successful the Ducks were, how successful the Bobcats were offensively last year, running the ball. I think the Ducks give up 2 rushing touchdowns in this game, but they grabbed 2 picks against Montana State.
Okay, you got anything else behind why we're believing that one there?
They got a new quarterback. Listen, I can't lie to you. I don't know that much about Montana State football. I know they're probably gonna be great running the ball. I know they have been successful with running quarterbacks so far. It stands to reason that that would be an option for them. I think the Ducks maybe do struggle a little bit against the run if they're going to rotate and really not be able to rush the passer as much as they'd like. But I think this secondary will step up.
All right, I think I gotta disagree with this one because I like 2 picks. I don't know if the Ducks give up 2 rushing touchdowns. I think Montana State scores a rushing touchdown in this game for sure. But it's been talked about playing a bend don't break style of defense, especially once you get into the red area and when you get to the other team into your territory. And I think that's going to be really a point of emphasis for the Ducks in this Montana State game is if they are running the football and finding that success, you're gonna have to make sure you shut them down once they start getting towards that 20-yard line and force a couple of field goals. I think Montana State ends up with a rushing touchdown early, and then Oregon really locks things in and doesn't give up another one. And I think unless they somehow hit some sort of pass, Montana State hits a pass or something like that for touchdown. I think Oregon gets a rushing touchdown early and then locks it down from there. But I do like 2 interceptions. I think I like them to be like caused by pressure. I think they'll be caused by pressure type of interceptions where they said a blitz or Mateo Uiagalelei is getting home and all of a sudden the quarterback has to throw one out there, or is throwing one up as he's getting hit and someone can find the ball and pick it off. Like I wouldn't be surprised if we see a guy like Bryce Betcher end up with an interception where he's kind of just around the ball and it gets tipped up in the air and he can make a play on it.
Absolutely. What are you saying?
All right, mine has to do with DeCorian Moore, Oregon star freshman receiver. I think he hits a play for 40+ yards. I think we get to see a bit of a flash of the explosiveness that he has to offer. I wrote in my notes here, reception or maybe even a punt return with the eyes emoji, because that's how kind of I was looking at myself as I wrote that down. I don't know. We don't know exactly who's going to be back there. I wouldn't be surprised to see Gary Bryant back there returning punts, but DeCorian Moore, we saw it in the Under Armour All-American game where he had an 80-something yard punt return touchdown. I would not be surprised if he breaks something big, either that's in the return game, on a screen pass, catching something down the sideline. I don't know if he's gonna. I could see him ending up with a stat line that's like 3 catches for like 90 yards because he's just making explosives.
Yeah, I think that'd be big for Dante Moore too. Yeah, because that's maybe the most important connection you want to see. Maybe right behind the Sadiq to Moore connection. In this first game, you want to see that they're developing something. The Moore to Moore connection, man.
Exactly. Shout out to Beck Parsons for writing that one for the spring game, despite the fact that they ended up on different teams in the spring game.
Oh, there. Yeah, it's gonna be exciting, man. I think that first game is gonna tell us a lot. You know, we don't get to see practice, so we don't really understand what this offense looks like on the field outside of that spring game where they weren't on the same team, and there's a lot of guys we haven't seen play together yet. I'm psyched. I can't wait for week 1.
Yeah, exactly. Me too. I think we're gonna have a lot to say after week 1, heading into week 2 about what this team looks like, how the rotations shake out in the secondary and the receiver group on the defensive line. So I'm looking forward to getting to talk to you after that one. We're gonna be back next week on Tuesday night, back to our regularly scheduled Tuesday shows, and then we'll have our first post game show after this Montana State game, and then it's gonna be Monday nights at 6 p.m. Every week. We'll be on here talking Oregon football, breaking things down about how that previous game went, and then looking ahead to those next matchups and stuff. So it's been a good time talking to you, Owen, and I think that's going to do it for us here. You got anything else to add?
That's all good, man. We're excited. It's almost the season.
All right. We're looking forward to week 1 here. We'll be back next Tuesday night.
All right,
Thank you so much for watching, and make sure you guys like and subscribe here to the Oregon Ducks Live on the Voice of College Football Network.